Your spine is being damaged in complete silence, and the most disturbing part is that you probably participate in it every single day without hesitation. Not through heavy lifting, not through extreme sports, not through catastrophic injury, through sitting. Through the ordinary habit of dropping your body onto hard surfaces and assuming nothing serious could possibly happen in just a few minutes. But the human spine does not measure danger the way the human mind does. Your body reacts instantly to pressure, compression, and imbalance, even when your brain dismisses it as harmless comfort. Within minutes of sitting on a hard surface, pressure begins traveling through the pelvis and lower back like weight being forced into a structure never designed to remain still for long periods. The natural curve of the spine starts flattening, muscles begin compensating for poor support, and tiny stabilizing tissues are pushed into stress positions they were never meant to hold continuously. Most people never notice this because the body is incredibly good at hiding damage in the beginning. Pain is delayed. Dysfunction is patient. The body survives quietly until it no longer can. That is why so many people wake up one day shocked that their back suddenly hurts, their posture suddenly feels weak, or their movement suddenly feels restricted, when in reality the damage started years earlier through small, repeated moments they ignored. The frightening truth is that the modern world has normalized habits that slowly destroy spinal health while convincing people they are completely safe. Hard chairs, stiff benches, concrete floors, rigid seating, long hours without movement, all of it conditions the body towards stiffness, compression, and weakness. Your spine is not indestructible. It is a living structure constantly adapting to the pressure you place on it every day. And if you repeatedly force it into harmful positions, your body eventually stops negotiating and starts collecting the price. The moment the body makes contact with a hard surface, an invisible chain reaction begins deep inside the spine and pelvis. There is no cushioning to absorb force, no softness to distribute pressure evenly, and no support system protecting the joints from continuous compression. Instead, the weight of the upper body drops directly into the hips and lower spine, forcing the skeletal structure to carry stress in a rigid and unnatural way. The body immediately starts making adjustments to survive this discomfort, but those adjustments come at a cost. The pelvis subtly rotates backward, the natural lumbar curve begins collapsing, and the muscles surrounding the spine tighten in an attempt to stabilize a posture that is slowly becoming inefficient. What feels harmless on the outside creates tension, imbalance, and fatigue internally within minutes. The spine was designed to move dynamically, constantly shifting and adapting through walking, standing, bending, and changing positions. Remaining fixed on a hard surface traps the body in a compressed state that slowly suffocates healthy movement patterns. Blood flow decreases in overworked muscles, nerves become irritated from sustained pressure, and connective tissues begin stiffening from inactivity. Most people mistake this process for normal tiredness or temporary discomfort, but the body interprets it as physical stress. The dangerous part is how quickly the nervous system adapts to these bad positions. The longer poor sitting habits continue, the more the body accepts dysfunction as its new normal. Muscles that should remain active start weakening from disuse, while smaller stabilizing muscles are forced to overwork until they become tight and exhausted. This imbalance spreads upward into the neck and downward into the hips, creating tension throughout the entire body. What begins as simple pressure against a hard surface quietly evolves into poor posture, restricted mobility, chronic stiffness, and long-term spinal strain. The body always adapts to repeated behavior, whether that behavior strengthens it or slowly breaks it apart. The human spine depends on movement the same way the heart depends on rhythm. Every joint, disc, muscle, and ligament inside the back is designed to function through constant motion and shifting pressure, not prolonged stillness. The spinal discs sitting between each vertebra act like shock absorbers, protecting the bones from grinding against each other while allowing flexibility and support throughout the body. But unlike most tissues, these discs do not have a direct blood supply feeding them nutrients every second. They survive through movement, compression changes, and circulation created by physical activity. The moment the body becomes stationary on a hard surface, that natural system begins slowing down. Constant pressure squeezes the discs unevenly, reducing their ability to absorb shock efficiently while gradually increasing stress across the spine. In the beginning, the body hides this damage remarkably well. There may only be stiffness when standing up, a dull ache in the lower back, or tension spreading into the hips after sitting too long. Most people ignore these early warnings because modern culture teaches people to treat discomfort as normal. But the spine keeps recording every hour of compression and inactivity like a silent memory stored inside the body. Over time, the discs begin losing hydration, flexibility decreases, and the spine becomes less capable of handling physical stress without pain. This is why people suddenly struggle with movements that once felt effortless, such as bending, lifting, or even remaining seated comfortably for extended periods. The breakdown appears sudden only because the warning signs were ignored for years. One of the harshest truths about spinal deterioration is that the body adapts to repeated neglect faster than most people realize. Muscles tighten to compensate for instability, posture slowly collapses, and the nervous system accepts unhealthy alignment as a default position. Eventually, the body forgets what proper movement even feels like. That is the hidden danger of prolonged sitting on hard surfaces. The damage is rarely dramatic in the moment, but repetition transforms small daily stress into long-term physical decline that quietly reshapes the entire structure of the body. Sitting on hard surfaces does far more than place pressure on bones and muscles. It slowly changes the way the nervous system responds to stress, posture, and movement. The human body is constantly scanning for comfort, balance, and safety, and the moment excessive pressure builds beneath the spine and pelvis, the nervous system reacts immediately. Muscles begin tightening automatically to protect vulnerable joints, breathing patterns become shallower without conscious awareness, and the body shifts into a subtle defensive state designed to reduce discomfort. What makes this dangerous is that most people remain trapped in this tension for hours at a time, allowing the body to normalize stress as a permanent condition. The spine and nervous system are deeply connected, meaning physical compression does not remain isolated in the lower back alone. Pressure and muscular tension gradually spread upward into the shoulders and neck, while restricted circulation and nerve irritation travel downward into the hips and legs. This is why prolonged sitting often leads to numbness, stiffness, headaches, fatigue, and a strange sense of physical heaviness that rest alone cannot fix. The body was never designed to remain folded and compressed for most of the day, yet modern life forces millions of people into exactly that position. Hard chairs, rigid seating, long screen hours, and minimal movement slowly train the nervous system to accept dysfunction as normal. Over time, the brain even begins adjusting posture subconsciously to avoid discomfort, creating distorted movement patterns that place even greater strain on the spine. The frightening reality is that chronic tension eventually stops feeling abnormal because the body adapts to whatever it experiences repeatedly. People begin living in a constant state of tightness without realizing how much energy their body wastes simply trying to hold itself together. The nervous system becomes overstimulated, recovery becomes slower, and physical exhaustion starts appearing even during ordinary daily activities. The body keeps responding to every hour of pressure, whether attention is given to it or not. That is why spinal health is never only about bones and posture. It is also about protecting the nervous system from living in continuous silent stress that slowly drains strength, movement, and long-term physical resilience. One of the most dangerous aspects of spinal damage is how quietly it develops beneath ordinary daily routines. The body rarely responds with immediate pain when harmful habits first begin. Instead, it compensates, adapts, and absorbs stress for as long as possible. That survival mechanism becomes the reason so many people ignore the early signs of deterioration. A slight stiffness after standing up, tension in the hips after long sitting periods, soreness in the lower back at the end of the day. These symptoms are often dismissed as fatigue, age, or temporary discomfort. In reality, they are warning signals from a structure struggling to maintain balance under repeated pressure. Hard surfaces accelerate this process because they remove the support and shock absorption the body naturally needs during seated positions. Over time, muscles become chronically tight, posture gradually collapses, and movement patterns begin changing without conscious awareness. The frightening part is that the body can continue functioning while slowly becoming weaker underneath. This creates the illusion that everything is fine until simple actions suddenly become painful or exhausting. Many people reach a point where standing for long periods feels uncomfortable, walking creates stiffness, or even sleeping fails to relieve physical tension. By then, the body is no longer reacting to one isolated habit. It is reacting to years of accumulated stress stored inside muscles, joints, discs, and connective tissues. Modern lifestyles make this problem worse because convenience constantly encourages inactivity. People spend hours seated on rigid surfaces while remaining disconnected from what their body is experiencing. Attention is placed on screens, schedules, and distractions, while posture deteriorates in the background. One of the harshest truths is that many individuals invest more effort into maintaining devices, furniture, and technology than maintaining the spine carrying their entire body through life. Yet the spine influences nearly every physical experience, including movement, energy, balance, and endurance. When spinal function begins declining, the effects spread far beyond discomfort alone. Chronic tension drains mental focus, fatigue increases throughout the body, and physical confidence slowly disappears. The body keeps adapting to repeated neglect until weakness eventually becomes a permanent part of daily life. The muscles surrounding the spine are designed to function like an active support system, constantly stabilizing the body during movement, maintaining posture, and protecting the joints from excessive strain. But prolonged sitting on hard surfaces slowly disrupts this system in ways most people never recognize until pain becomes unavoidable. The moment the body remains fixed in a compressed seated position, major muscle groups begin shutting down from lack of activation. The glutes, which are among the strongest stabilizing muscles in the body, gradually become inactive because sitting removes the need for them to engage properly. At the same time, the abdominal muscles responsible for supporting spinal alignment weaken from underuse, while the hip flexors tighten from remaining shortened for extended periods. This creates a dangerous imbalance throughout the entire body. Once these larger muscles stop functioning efficiently, the lower back is forced to absorb stress it was never meant to handle alone. Small, stabilizing muscles surrounding the spine begin overworking continuously in an attempt to compensate for weakened support systems, eventually becoming tight, inflamed, and exhausted. The result is a body that appears functional on the outside while slowly developing structural instability underneath. Pain often spreads into unexpected areas because the body operates as one connected chain rather than isolated parts. Tight hips pull against the pelvis, altering spinal alignment. Weak glutes force the lower back to overcompensate during movement. Poor core activation shifts pressure upward into the neck and shoulders. What begins as simple sitting gradually transforms into a full-body pattern of dysfunction. The modern lifestyle intensifies this problem because comfort and convenience constantly reduce physical activity. Long sitting hours teach the body to conserve movement, weaken supportive muscles, and normalize poor posture. Over time, these patterns become automatic, making stiffness and discomfort feel like a natural part of life rather than signs of physical decline. One of the most damaging psychological effects of chronic discomfort is adaptation. Once pain becomes familiar, many people stop questioning it. They accept tension, fatigue, and restricted movement as ordinary experiences instead of recognizing them as consequences of repeated neglect. The body always adapts to what it practices most, and when inactivity becomes the dominant habit, weakness slowly becomes part of the body's foundation. Most people believe that occasional exercise is enough to counteract long hours of sitting, but the reality is far more uncompromising. The human body does not respond to effort in isolated moments as much as it responds to consistency in daily patterns. One short workout cannot erase the structural stress created by hours of spinal compression on a hard surface. The body remembers repetition, not intention. If the majority of the day is spent in poor posture, under constant pressure with minimal movement, then the foundation of physical health is being shaped in a negative direction, regardless of occasional bursts of activity. Sitting for long periods forces the spine into a static, load-bearing position that gradually reduces circulation, limits joint mobility, and weakens stabilizing muscles. When this condition is repeated daily, the body adapts by reducing its range of motion and efficiency in order to conserve energy. That adaptation feels like stiffness, tightness, and fatigue, but it is actually the body adjusting to long-term stress. Exercise can improve strength and mobility, but it cannot fully reverse hours of continuous compression if the rest of the day reinforces the same harmful pattern. This is why many people feel temporary relief after stretching or working out, only to return to discomfort shortly afterward. The underlying issue is not the lack of exercise, but the dominance of inactivity and poor posture throughout the day. The spine operates on cumulative load, meaning every minute of sitting contributes to the overall stress placed on its structure. Over time, even small daily habits begin shaping long-term physical outcomes. The misconception that health can be repaired in short bursts of effort creates a false sense of security, allowing damaging routines to continue unchecked. In reality, the body requires frequent movement, regular position changes, and consistent spinal decompression to maintain balance. Without these elements, the effects of sitting compound silently in the background. What feels like harmless routine behavior slowly becomes structural wear and tear that no single workout session can fully undo. The body is always responding to the total pattern of a day, not isolated moments of effort or neglect. The spine is not just a column of bones supporting the body, it is the central framework that influences movement, posture, energy distribution, and overall physical performance. Every action depends on its stability, yet it is often taken for granted until discomfort begins to interfere with daily life. Prolonged sitting on hard surfaces quietly undermines this structure by placing continuous pressure on the vertebrae, discs, and surrounding muscles without allowing proper recovery or realignment. Over time, this repeated compression reduces the spine's ability to maintain its natural curvature, which is essential for balanced weight distribution across the body. Once that balance is disrupted, even simple movements start to require more effort because the body is no longer operating in an efficient mechanical state. Energy that should be used for strength and mobility is instead consumed by compensating for poor posture and structural imbalance. The body becomes less coordinated, less stable, and more prone to fatigue even during basic activities. This decline does not happen suddenly. It builds gradually through unnoticed repetition. Every extended sitting period adds a small layer of stress that accumulates silently within the system. As flexibility decreases, stiffness increases, and movement begins to feel restricted in ways that were previously effortless. This is why many people experience a slow loss of physical confidence without being able to identify a single cause. The spine adapts to the environment it is repeatedly placed in, and when that environment is dominated by rigidity and inactivity, the body begins reshaping itself around limitation instead of strength. Modern habits amplify this issue by encouraging prolonged sitting with minimal interruption. Hours can pass without significant movement, allowing compression to remain constant and recovery to remain absent. Over time, this creates a physical condition where the spine is functioning under continuous strain, even during rest. The result is not only discomfort, but a progressive reduction in physical capability. When spinal efficiency declines, every system connected to movement is affected, creating a chain reaction that influences posture, endurance, and overall quality of physical life. Most people underestimate how early spinal decline actually begins because the process does not announce itself with dramatic pain or sudden injury. It starts quietly, often years before any serious discomfort is noticed, embedded within daily habits that feel completely harmless. Sitting on hard surfaces for extended periods plays a major role in this silent progression because it exposes the spine to constant compression without relief. The human body is remarkably adaptive, which is both its strength and its weakness. It can function under stress for long periods by redistributing load, tightening muscles, and altering posture to maintain basic stability. However, this compensation comes at a cost. Every adjustment the body makes to survive poor sitting habits slowly moves it further away from natural alignment. What begins as minor stiffness becomes reduced flexibility, and what begins as occasional discomfort gradually evolves into chronic restriction. The danger lies in how normal these early signs feel. Society conditions people to dismiss stiffness, fatigue, and postural discomfort as unavoidable parts of modern life, especially in sedentary environments. This normalization prevents awareness from forming at the stage where change would be most effective. Over time, the spine becomes shaped by repetition rather than intention. If most of the day is spent in a compressed, seated position, the body adapts by shortening certain muscle groups, weakening others, and reducing the range of motion required for healthy movement. This adaptation is not reversible in a single moment because it reflects accumulated behavior patterns rather than isolated incidents. The most concerning aspect is that physical decline often becomes noticeable only when it begins interfering with basic functions such as standing, walking, or sleeping comfortably. By that stage, the body has already spent years reinforcing inefficient movement patterns. The spine, which should act as a flexible and resilient support system, begins operating under constant strain. This gradual shift transforms everyday comfort into subtle deterioration, where the body continues to function but with decreasing efficiency, increasing effort, and rising vulnerability to pain. The reality of spinal health is that it does not collapse in a single moment. It accumulates in silence until the body can no longer ignore the consequences. Every hour spent sitting on a hard surface adds invisible pressure to a system that was designed for movement, not compression. Over time, this pressure becomes structural memory, stored in muscles, joints, and connective tissues that begin to lose their natural elasticity and responsiveness. The result is not immediate breakdown, but gradual limitation. Movement becomes slightly heavier, posture requires more effort, and comfort becomes harder to maintain without conscious adjustment. These changes are often dismissed because they do not interrupt life instantly, but the body is always recording the cost of every repeated habit. Eventually, the accumulation reaches a threshold where discomfort turns into restriction, and restriction turns into pain that no longer responds easily to rest. At that point, the body is no longer reacting to a single behavior, but to years of reinforced patterns that shaped its structure. The most difficult truth to accept is that prevention requires awareness long before pain appears. Once structural imbalance becomes deeply established, the body must work significantly harder to perform even basic functions, and recovery becomes slower because the system is already operating under long-term strain. What feels like a small daily choice, such as sitting without support or remaining still for too long, becomes a long-term influence on spinal integrity. The spine does not distinguish between intention and impact. It only responds to repetition. If repetition is damaging, adaptation will follow in the same direction. The body always prioritizes survival over comfort, which means it will continue functioning even under inefficient and harmful conditions until it reaches its limit. That is why ignoring early signs is so costly, because by the time pain becomes undeniable, the habits that created it have already shaped the physical structure for years. The final truth is simple but unforgiving. Every moment spent in poor posture is a small investment into future limitation, and every moment of awareness and movement is an investment into long-term resilience.